The autumn wind whipped through Fort Benning, Georgia, carrying with it the familiar scent of pine and red clay that had become Sarah Chen's world for the past 6 months. She stood at attention with her platoon, her muscles screaming from the morning's 10-mile ruck march, but her face betrayed nothing. The October sun was already climbing high, promising another sweltering day despite the season. "Platoon dismissed!" barked Drill Sergeant Martinez. As the formation broke apart, Sarah caught her reflection in the window of the administrative building. Her once soft features had hardened, her jaw more defined, her shoulders broader. The woman staring back at her was a stranger to the girl who had left San Francisco 8 months ago amid a storm of family disappointment. "Chen, get your ass to the commander's office, now." Drill Sergeant Martinez's voice cut through her thoughts. Sarah's stomach dropped. A summons to Battalion Commander Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Hayes' office was rarely good news. She double-timed across the quad, her boots hitting the pavement in perfect rhythm, each step echoing the words that had haunted her since the day she'd enlisted. "You're throwing your life away, Sarah. You're the shame of this family." Her mother's words, delivered with the kind of cold precision that only Dr. Catherine Chen, renowned cardiac surgeon, could manage. Sarah had been accepted to Stanford Medical School, following the predetermined path laid out by 3 generations of Chen doctors. Her older brother Michael was already a successful neurosurgeon. Her younger sister Emma was in her 3rd year at Johns Hopkins. And Sarah? Sarah had walked into an Army recruiting station instead. The commander's office was on the 3rd floor of the headquarters building. Sarah took the stairs 2 at a time, her mind racing through every possible infraction. Had she failed a test? Made a critical error during training? She'd been pushing herself harder than anyone in her platoon, determined to prove, to whom she wasn't sure anymore, that this hadn't been a mistake. "Private Chen reporting as ordered, ma'am," Sarah announced, snapping to attention in front of the secretary's desk. "Go right in, Private. She's expecting you," the secretary said, barely looking up from her computer. Sarah knocked 3 times on the heavy wooden door. "Enter!" Lieutenant Colonel Hayes sat behind her desk, her silver eagles catching the light from the window. She was a woman who commanded respect without raising her voice, her presence filling the room. Sarah had seen her only a handful of times during basic training, always from a distance. Up close, the commander's penetrating gaze seemed to see right through her. "At ease, Private Chen. Take a seat." Sarah sat on the edge of the chair, her back ramrod straight. "Do you know why you're here?" Hayes asked, leaning back in her chair. "No, ma'am." Hayes studied her for a long moment. "Your drill sergeants have been talking about you. So have your instructors. Your PT scores are in the top 1%. Your tactical assessments are exceptional. Your leadership during field exercises has been notable." Sarah remained silent, unsure where this was heading. "But what really caught my attention," Hayes continued, opening a folder on her desk, "was the incident last week during the night navigation course." Sarah's mind flashed back to that rain-soaked night. Private Johnson had twisted his ankle badly in a hidden ditch. With their squad already behind schedule and penalty points mounting, most would have called for a medical evacuation. Sarah had other ideas. "You improvised a splint, redistributed his gear among the squad, and modified your route to avoid the worst terrain," Hayes read from the report. "You not only completed the course but brought your entire squad in under time. No one left behind. It was a team effort." "Ma'am," Sarah said carefully, "don't be modest, Chen. It doesn't suit you." Hayes closed the folder. "Private Johnson credits you with saving his military career. He'd have been recycled to another class if he'd been medically evacuated, maybe washed out entirely." Sarah thought of Johnson, a kid from rural Alabama who'd joined the Army to escape poverty, who talked constantly about making his grandmother proud. She'd seen too much of her own desperation in his eyes that night to leave him behind. "Tell me," Hayes said, leaning forward, "why did someone accepted to Stanford Medical School enlist as a private in the United States Army?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Sarah had rehearsed this answer 100 times, but sitting here, under Hayes' unwavering gaze, all her prepared responses crumbled. "I wanted to serve something greater than myself, ma'am," she began, the words feeling hollow even as she spoke them. "Bullshit." Hayes' response was sharp but not unkind. "Try again." Sarah took a breath. "The truth, then. My family. They had my entire life planned out, every step, every achievement. I was suffocating, ma'am. I needed to know if I could be something more than just another Dr. Chen. I needed to know if I had what it takes to lead when it really matters. Not just in an operating room, but out there." She gestured vaguely toward the window, toward the wider world beyond Fort Benning. Hayes nodded slowly. "And what does your family think of this decision?" Sarah's voice caught. She cleared her throat. They've made their feelings clear. Ma'am. I imagine they have. Hayes stood and walked to the window, looking out at the training grounds below. My father was a coal miner in West Virginia. When I told him I was joining the army, he didn't speak to me for 2 years. Said I was betraying everything he'd worked for. The chance for his daughter to have clean hands and a college degree. She turned back to Sarah. It took him watching me pin on my captain's bars to understand that sometimes the hardest path is the right one. That leadership isn't about meeting other people's expectations. It's about exceeding your own. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest, a knot she hadn't realized was there. I'm recommending you for officer candidate school, Hayes announced. Your basic training ends in 2 weeks. If you accept, you'll start OCS immediately after. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. OCS was the path to becoming an officer, a leader. It was validation that she hadn't thrown her life away, that she could be more than the family disappointment. However, Hayes continued, I need to know you're doing this for the right reasons, not to prove something to your family or to rebel against their expectations. The Army doesn't need officers with something to prove. We need leaders who understand that true strength comes from lifting others up, not from standing above them. Ma'am, that night with Johnson, Sarah searched for the right words. I've spent my whole life being told I was exceptional, that I was meant for great things. But it was always about me, my achievements, my future. When I saw Johnson struggling, when I saw the fear in his eyes, I realized that being exceptional means nothing if you can't use it to help others succeed. That's the kind of leader I want to be. Hayes returned to her desk, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. That's what your drill sergeant saw in you, Chen. Not just physical prowess or tactical brilliance. They saw someone who understands that leadership is about service. The question is, are you ready for the weight of that responsibility? Yes, ma'am, Sarah answered without hesitation. Good. There's one more thing. Hayes pulled out another document. Your emergency contact information still lists your parents. Do they even know where you are right now? Sarah's silence was answer enough. You might want to consider reaching out, Hayes suggested. Not for their approval, but for your own peace of mind. The path you're choosing is difficult enough without carrying the added weight of unfinished business. I'll consider it, ma'am. Do more than consider it. That's not an order, just advice from someone who's been where you are. Hayes stood, signaling the end of the meeting. You have 48 hours to decide about OCS. Talk to your drill sergeants, talk to the other candidates. Hell, talk to the cooks if you need to. But make sure this decision is yours and yours alone. Sarah stood and snapped to attention. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. As she reached the door, Hayes called out one more time. Chen? Ma'am? That family of yours? The one that calls you their shame? One day, they're going to realize what I already know. You're not the shame of the Chen family. You're its true leader. You just needed to find the right battlefield to prove it. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes but blinked them back. Thank you, ma'am. She left the office and descended the stairs slowly, her mind reeling. The October sun felt different now, less oppressive and more like a spotlight illuminating a path she hadn't dared to imagine. As she crossed the quad, she saw her platoon gathering for afternoon drills. Johnson was there, walking without a limp, laughing with the others. Her phone, locked in her barracks room, had 17 missed calls from her mother. She'd been ignoring them for weeks, each unanswered ring another brick in the wall between her and her family. But Hayes was right. She couldn't move forward while dragging the weight of the past. That evening, after chow, Sarah sat on her bunk and stared at her phone. Around her, the barracks buzzed with the usual noise. Martinez complaining about the food, Williams writing another letter to her girlfriend, Thompson cleaning his rifle for the 3rd time that day. This had become her family, these soldiers who'd sweat and bled beside her. But that didn't erase the family she'd left behind. She dialed before she could lose her nerve. Sarah? Her mother's voice was sharp, clinical. Do you have any idea what you've put this family through? 8 months, Sarah. 8 months of explaining to everyone why our daughter threw away Stanford for this fantasy of playing soldier? It's not a fantasy, Mom, Sarah said quietly. I've been recommended for officer candidate school. Silence on the other end. Then, I don't know what that means, and frankly, I don't care. When are you coming home? I'm not. The words came out stronger than she'd expected. This is my home now. These people are Those people are not your family. Her mother's composure cracked. Your family is here wondering what we did wrong. Michael says to give you time, that you'll come to your senses. Emma cries every time someone asks about you. And your father, he won't even say your name anymore. Each word was a dagger, but Sarah had learned to endure pain. The army had taught her that. I'm sorry I've disappointed you, she said, but I'm not sorry for the choice I made. For the first time in my life, I'm doing something that matters. Not because it looks good on a resume or because it's what's expected, but because it's right. Right? Her mother laughed bitterly. What's right about abandoning everything we've worked for? Everything we've sacrificed to give you opportunities? You gave me opportunities to follow your dreams, not mine. Sarah gripped the phone tighter. I'm grateful for everything you've done, but I need you to understand. This isn't about rejecting you or our family. It's about finding out who I am when I'm not just another Chen doctor. You're being selfish. Maybe I am, Sarah admitted, but I'd rather be selfish and authentic than successful and hollow. Another long silence. When her mother spoke again, her voice was cold and final. When you've had enough of this adventure, don't expect us to welcome you back with open arms. You've made your choice, Sarah. Now live with it. The line went dead. Sarah sat in the gathering darkness of the barracks, her phone silent in her hands. Around her, the sounds of military life continued, boots being polished, gear being checked, quiet conversations about home and dreams, and tomorrow's training. You okay, Chen? Johnson appeared at the foot of her bunk, concern written across his young face. Yeah, I'm good, she said, and was surprised to find she meant it. Heard you got called to the commander's office today. Everything all right? Sarah looked at him, this kid she'd carried through the darkness and rain, who trusted her judgment when it mattered most. Behind him, she could see the rest of her squad pretending not to eavesdrop, the bonds of shared hardship making them protective of each other. Everything's better than all right, she said. Just had to cut some dead weight. Johnson grinned. Roger that. Hey, we're heading to the day room to study for tomorrow's exam. You coming? Sarah stood, leaving her phone on the bunk. Her mother had been wrong about one thing. These people were her family now. Not by blood, but by choice. And in the army, she was learning, the families you choose are often stronger than the ones you're born into. Lead the way, Private, she said. As they walked toward the day room, Sarah thought about Lieutenant Colonel Hayes' words, the true leader. Not because of her test scores or PT results, but because she understood that leadership meant carrying others when they couldn't carry themselves. It meant making the hard choices, bearing the weight of responsibility, and sometimes it meant walking away from the life others had planned for you. The shame of the family? Let them think that. Sarah knew the truth now. She was exactly where she belonged, becoming exactly who she was meant to be. And in 2 weeks, when she walked across that stage to receive her basic training certificate, she'd do it not as Dr. Catherine Chen's disappointing daughter, but as Private Sarah Chen, future officer in the United States Army. The day room was bright and noisy, filled with soldiers bent over field manuals and notebooks. Sarah found her place among them, just another uniform in a sea of green. But she knew, with a certainty that settled in her bones like coming home, that she wouldn't be just another uniform for long. Outside, the Georgia night settled over Fort Benning, stars emerging one by one like soldiers falling into formation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests of her resolve. But tonight, surrounded by her chosen family, preparing for whatever battles lay ahead, Sarah Chen felt anything but ashamed. She felt ready. 6 months later, Fort Benning, Georgia. The pre-dawn darkness wrapped around Sarah like a familiar blanket as she stood before her OCS class. Officer Candidate School had been everything Lieutenant Colonel Hayes had warned her about, a pressure cooker designed to forge leaders from raw potential. Now, as Senior Candidate Chen, she was responsible for getting her class through their final field exercise. Listen up, candidates, she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority she'd developed over months of trials. Operation Steel Resolve begins in 30 minutes. This is our final test. Everything we've learned, everything we've suffered for, comes down to the next 72 hours. The 52 remaining candidates of Class 0824 stood in a semicircle around her, their faces painted in camouflage, their eyes reflecting a mixture of exhaustion and determination. They'd started with 90 candidates. The program had winnowed them down to those who truly had what it took. Candidate Chen, a voice called from the darkness, report to the TASI office immediately. Sarah's stomach tightened. TAC, training, advising, and counseling, officers were the gatekeepers of OCS. A summons now, minutes before their final exercise, couldn't be good. Candidate Morrison, take over the briefing, Sarah ordered, then double-timed toward the command building. The TAC office was lit by harsh fluorescence that made everything look sickly and surreal. Behind the desk sat Captain Rodriguez, her primary TAC officer, alongside 2 people Sarah hadn't expected to see, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes and a full-bird colonel she didn't recognize. Candidate Chen reporting as ordered, sir. At ease, candidate, Captain Rodriguez said. Take a seat. Sarah sat, her mind racing. The presence of a full colonel at 0430 hours meant something significant was happening. Candidate Chen, the colonel began, his voice gravelly with decades of command. I'm Colonel Marcus Thompson, brigade commander. I'm here because we have an unusual situation that requires immediate resolution. He slid a tablet across the desk. Sarah looked down to see a news article from the San Francisco Chronicle. Local medical dynasty daughter missing, family offers reward. Her blood ran cold. Your family has apparently decided you've been kidnapped or coerced, Colonel Thompson continued. They've hired private investigators and have been making inquiries that have reached the Department of Defense. They're claiming you're being held against your will. Sir, that's absolutely not. We know, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes interrupted, but this has become a distraction we can't afford. Your mother has connections. She's reached out to congressional representatives, implying the Army has brainwashed her daughter. Sarah felt anger surge through her. Even from across the country, her family was trying to control her narrative. What do you need me to do, sir? She asked. Colonel Thompson leaned back. We need this resolved before you're commissioned. A new officer can't begin their career under this kind of cloud. You have two options. First, you can take emergency leave, fly to San Francisco, and resolve this in person. You'd miss the final exercise and have to recycle to the next OCS class. Sarah's heart sank. Recycling meant another 6 months. It meant watching her classmates pin on their lieutenant bars while she started over. What's the second option, sir? You complete the exercise as planned, but immediately after, before commissioning, you'll have to face your family. We're flying them here. Here? Sarah couldn't hide her shock. They're coming to Fort Benning? They'll arrive in 3 days, Captain Rodriguez confirmed. The Army's position is clear. You're here voluntarily, excelling in your training, but we need them to hear it from you, on record, with witnesses. Sarah thought of her classmates waiting in the darkness, counting on her leadership for the final exercise. Then she thought of facing her family, here, on her turf, but still under their judgmental gaze. I'll complete the exercise, sir, she said firmly, and I'll meet with my family afterward. Colonel Thompson studied her. You understand this could get ugly? Family disputes in public rarely end well. With respect, sir, I've been crawling through Georgia mud, sleeping 4 hours a night, and learning to lead soldiers into combat. I can handle my family. A ghost of a smile crossed Hayes' face. That's what I told them you'd say. There's one more thing, Captain Rodriguez added. Your final exercise has been modified. You'll be leading a joint operation with an active duty unit from the 75th Ranger Regiment. Real soldiers, real scenarios. Colonel Thompson wants to see if you're ready for the weight of actual command. Sarah felt the pressure ratchet up another notch. The 75th Rangers were elite infantry, the best of the best. Leading them as a candidate was almost unheard of. Any questions, candidate? Colonel Thompson asked. Just one, sir. Will my family's presence affect my commissioning if I pass all requirements? Not if I have anything to say about it, Thompson replied. But Chen, understand something. The Army needs officers who can handle complex situations with competing pressures. Consider this your first real test of that ability. Yes. Sir. Dismissed. And candidate? Good luck. You'll need it. Sarah ran back through the darkness, her mind compartmentalizing the family crisis into a box she'd deal with later. Right now, her classmates needed her focused. She found them loaded up and ready to move out. Morrison had done well in her absence. Everything all right? He asked quietly. Just another obstacle to overcome, she replied. Let's move out. The exercise area covered 40 square miles of dense Georgia wilderness. Their mission? Locate and secure a simulated weapons cache while coordinating with the ranger unit that would provide overwatch and support. It was a test of land navigation, tactical planning, small unit leadership, and most importantly, the ability to integrate with experienced soldiers who had no obligation to respect candidate insignia. 24 hours in, Sarah's unit was deep in the woods, rain turning the ground into a sucking morass of mud and misery. Half her candidates were struggling with minor injuries, blisters, twisted ankles, dehydration despite the rain. Morale was flagging. This is bullshit, she heard candidate Davies mutter. We're not even real officers yet, and they expect us to keep up with Rangers? Sarah made her way to him. You're right, she said, loud enough for others to hear. We're not officers yet, but in 3 days, some of us will be. And when you're leading a platoon in Afghanistan or Syria, do you think the enemy cares how tired you are? Do you think your soldiers will accept this is bullshit as leadership? Davies straightened. No, ma'am. Ma'am? Sarah smiled grimly. I'm not a ma'am yet, Davies. I'm just another candidate covered in mud and rain. The only difference between us is that I refuse to let this break me. The question is, what are you going to do? Before Davies could answer, her radio crackled. Candidate 6? This is Ranger 6. We've got movement 2 clicks north of your position. Possible Op 4 elements. How copy? Op 4, opposing force. The exercise just got real. Good copy, Ranger 6. We're moving to intercept. Request overwatch at grid. She rattled off coordinates from memory. Her land navigation skills automatic now. Roger, Candidate 6. Be advised, Op 4 strength estimated at platoon level. You're outnumbered 3-1. Sarah gathered her squad leaders. In the gathering dawn, their faces were masks of exhaustion and camouflage paint. Here's the situation, she began, sketching a quick diagram in the mud. We've got potential enemy contact here. We're outnumbered, but we have Ranger overwatch. Options? Avoid contact, Morrison suggested. Continue to objective. Direct assault with Ranger support, offered Kowalski, always aggressive. What about deception? This from Lee, the quiet candidate who rarely spoke but always observed. We're outnumbered, but they don't know that. Make them think we're larger than we are? Sarah felt a surge of pride. They were thinking like officers, considering options beyond the obvious. Lee's onto something, she said. Here's what we're going to do. The next 2 hours were a blur of movement and controlled chaos. Sarah split her force, using noise and movement to create the illusion of a full company-sized element. The Rangers, initially skeptical of the candidate's abilities, quickly got on board when they saw the tactical sophistication of the plan. Candidate 6? Ranger 6? The radio crackled. Your deception is working. Op 4 is repositioning to defend against a perceived major assault. Path to objective is clear. Copy. Ranger 6. Moving to objective. They reached the weapons cache site as the sun climbed toward noon, the rain finally breaking. Sarah's candidates were exhausted but victorious. As they established security and began the notional process of securing the cache, she noticed several figures approaching through the woods. Not Op 4, but evaluation staff. Among them was Colonel Thompson himself. Candidate Chen, he called out. Report. Sarah jogged over, suddenly aware of how she must look. Covered in mud, uniform torn in places, 48 hours without real sleep showing in every line of her face. Sir, Candidate Chen reports mission success. Objective secured with 0 casualties. I've been monitoring your radio traffic, Thompson said. Interesting tactical decisions. Where did you learn to use deception operations like that? Sun Tzu, sir, and my grandmother. Thompson raised an eyebrow. She survived the Cultural Revolution in China by making the Red Guards think her apartment building had already been searched. She used neighbors to create activity patterns that suggested a thorough ransacking had occurred. Same principle. Make the enemy see what they expect to see. Your family history is more complex than your parents' medical degrees suggest, Thompson observed. Yes, sir. My grandmother understood survival and leadership in ways my parents never had to learn. Thompson nodded slowly. The Rangers were impressed. That's not easy to achieve. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. You still have 24 hours of exercise left. And then, he paused. Your family arrived early. They're at Fort Benning now, demanding to see you. Sarah felt her chest tighten but kept her face neutral. Understood, sir. Complete your mission, candidate. Everything else can wait. As Thompson and the evaluators departed, Morrison approached. You good? Sarah looked at her fellow candidates, muddy, exhausted, but still pushing forward under her leadership. In 6 months, they'd become more than classmates. They were her brothers and sisters in arms, bonded by shared suffering and mutual respect. I'm good, she said. Let's finish this. The final 24 hours tested every limit. Sleep deprivation made simple tasks monumental. The rain returned with a vengeance. 2 candidates had to be medically evacuated. Heat exhaustion despite the cold rain, their bodies simply shutting down. But Sarah's unit pressed on. When Candidate Patterson collapsed from exhaustion 2 miles from the finish point, Sarah and Morrison carried him. When the evaluators threw a surprise night assault at them, her coordinated defense with the Rangers held firm. Finally, 72 hours after they'd begun, Sarah led her battered unit across the finish line. They'd completed every objective, maintained unit cohesion, and proven they could integrate with active duty forces. Outstanding work, candidates, Captain Rodriguez announced at the after-action review. Candidate Chen, your leadership was particularly noteworthy. The Rangers have requested you for their upcoming training rotation. That's unprecedented for an OCS candidate. Sarah felt pride surge through her exhaustion, but it was tempered by what came next. Candidate Chen, Report to the commander's conference room in 1 hour. Civilian clothes authorized. Civilian clothes. Her family was waiting. An hour later, showered but still feeling the bone-deep exhaustion of the exercise, Sarah stood outside the conference room in the one set of civilian clothes she'd kept, jeans and a simple button-down shirt. Through the door, she could hear familiar voices that seemed to belong to a different lifetime. She knocked and entered. The room felt too small for all the tension it contained. Her parents sat at one side of a long table, her mother impeccable in a designer suit despite the Georgia humidity, her father in his characteristic polo and khakis. Michael was there too, looking uncomfortable in his scrubs, clearly pulled from his hospital shift. Even Emma had come, her Yale sweatshirt a pointed reminder of acceptable Chen achievements. On the other side sat Lieutenant Colonel Hayes and Colonel Thompson, with Captain Rodriguez standing near the door. Sarah! Her mother stood, moving as if to embrace her, then stopping at Sarah's body language. My God, what have they done to you? I look like a soldier, Mom, Sarah said evenly, taking a seat across from her family. Because that's what I am. You're not a soldier. Her father spoke for the first time in 8 months. You're a confused young woman who's thrown away her future for some misguided rebellion. Dr. Chen, Colonel Thompson interjected, your daughter is 48 hours from being commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. She's demonstrated exceptional leadership abilities and has earned the respect of every officer and enlisted soldier she's served with. I don't care about their respect, Catherine Chen snapped. I care about my daughter, the one who was supposed to save lives, not learn how to take them. I am learning to save lives, Sarah said quietly, just differently than you imagined. Do you know what I did last month? I led a training session on combat medicine for enlisted soldiers. Kids from poverty, from broken homes, kids who joined the Army because it was their only shot at a future. I taught them how to save each other's lives on a battlefield. How is that less valuable than surgery? Michael leaned forward. Sarah, we're not saying military service isn't honorable, but you had options others don't. You could have served as a doctor, as what you wanted me to be, Sarah finished. I've spent 6 months learning what kind of leader I am when nobody's handing me a predetermined path. And you know what I learned? I'm good at this. Really good. Good at playing war games? Her mother's voice dripped condescension. Good at leading people through impossible situations, Sarah corrected. Good at making decisions under pressure. Good at inspiring others to be better than they think they can be. 3 days ago, I led a joint operation with Army Rangers, elite soldiers with combat experience, and they requested me for their training rotation. Me, a candidate. Sarah, Emma spoke for the first time, her voice small. We just want you to come home. Sarah's heart clenched at her little sister's tears. I am home, Em. This is where I belong. So that's it? Her father's calm finally cracked. 23 years of raising you, of sacrificing, of building a legacy for you to inherit, and you throw it all away for this uniform? I'm not throwing anything away, Sarah said. I'm building something new, my own legacy. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes cleared her throat. If I may, Dr. Chen, your daughter scored in the top 5% of her officer candidate school class. She's shown exceptional tactical acumen, physical prowess, and most importantly, the kind of moral courage that makes great officers. The Army isn't where she's hiding from your expectations. It's where she's exceeding everyone's expectations, including her own. You don't understand. Catherine Chen turned on Hayes. We come from a culture where family is everything, where children honor their parents' sacrifices by building on what came before. She's not just rejecting medicine, she's rejecting us. No, Mom, Sarah said firmly. I'm rejecting your definition of who I should be. There's a difference. Is there? Her mother's voice turned cold. Because from where I sit, you've chosen strangers over family. You've chosen violence over healing. I've chosen service, Sarah interrupted. Grandmother would understand even if you don't. The mention of her grandmother, her mother's mother, made Catherine flinch. The old woman had died when Sarah was 15, but her stories of survival, of leadership during impossible times, had planted seeds that were only now flowering. Don't you dare invoke her memory to justify this, her mother hissed. Why not? She led her entire neighborhood through the Cultural Revolution. She made impossible choices to keep people alive.